Thank you very much for coming, everybody here in Woodstock, Vermont, and everybody online. We have been looking forward to this call, and we have a great panel of women here and also a great audience. So as we get going, just please understand I have to get acclimated to all of this, as well as being able to speak out to the group. One of the things that we really want to speak about is how women are coming into the workplace, how it's changed after COVID, and also how it hasn't changed in so many years. And when I was talking with Meg, when I was looking at this report and finding out more about the Vermont Women's Fund, which we should, as a community, as a Vermont community, be so excited about what's available in our state for us and how far women have come and how much they are empowered and empower to make changes in Vermont for us. But when I was looking at this, it reminded me, and some of us in this room, not all of us, but some of us in this room have mothers who couldn't get a credit card, that we were on the planet and watched as our mothers couldn't start a business and couldn't get a loan and couldn't do it without a man's signature. And though we are working really hard to get equal pay at this point, obviously that's changed, but you still have people who are speaking from the standpoint of too much has happened for women. There is a new study that shows that in the Gen Z community, that about 47% thinks that the women's movement when it comes to equal pay has gone too far. And then now it's working against men. And yet we're still at 77% on the dollar. And that has changed for different communities as well, which is considerably less. So there's lots we want to talk about, but we're going to frame it from the standpoint of this incredible study, one of the only studies that is statewide to give us a sense of where women stand in communities and in businesses. So to begin, what I'd like to do is have each member on the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll get it going. And we very much look forward to the conversation. We really want to make sure that there's a dynamic conversation in the room. And I just realized I forgot to mention one thing, where we are. The UN Commission on the Status of Women is a 2-week conference that happens in New York. I have been involved with it for the last 6 years through Pathways to Peace. And when you go, it's amazing. Thousands of women descend on New York from all languages and all colors, and the vibrancy of the outfits and just the conversation. And one of the things that's great about it is not necessarily just the panel, it's what happens in the hallways between the women, that the panel sparks conversation, but the work gets done between women from all over the world, finding out about each other and starting conversations and then starting something. So many things have come out of those couple of weeks. And so that's why we wanted to do it this way, that we wanted to give you all a chance after this conversation to talk amongst yourself and see what you have to say to each other, to see how you want to mentor each other, to see how you want to start something, to see how we want to move forward as women in Vermont. So before we introduce everybody, I'd like to pass this to Tezekiah Gabriel, who is the Executive Director of Pathways to Peace and who I've been honored to work with for, maybe 10 years now. Tezekiah. We can't hear you.
Can you unmute Tezekiah?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Time flies when you're having fun, right, Deborah? And so I'm just so honored and delighted to be here with all of you. And first of all, I'd love for us to give a round of applause for our beautiful in-house Pathways to Peace harpist, Tammy Briggs. I mean, what a wonderful way to begin any time together. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Tammy. We love you so. And Deborah, yes, here we are again at CSW68. And to talk today about the empowerment of women and girls post-COVID and post-Roe v. Wade. Clearly, this is a topic that many of us are interested in, and we have many people in the Zoom room. And of course, we can, we're live streaming. And as John Raymer tells us through the Sign Network, that we could reach up to 2 million people through our Facebook pages, over 100 Facebook pages. So we're a large group here, and I'm just so honored and delighted to be with you. As Deborah said, I'm Tezekiah Gabriel. I'm the Executive Director of Pathways to Peace. And those of us who are attending via Zoom and on Facebook pages, wow, would we love to be with you in your place. It looks wonderful. The Woodstock Inn and Resort in Woodstock, Vermont. So we're honored and delighted to be here. So before we begin, I'm just going to say a few words about Pathways to Peace. Pathways to Peace is a local, global, international peace building organization. We're a UN designated peace messenger organization that holds consultative status with the UN Department of Global Communications, or as we say, DGC, and the UN Economic and Social Council, or ECOSOC. For over 40 years, we're celebrating, we're in the middle of our 40th year. Pathways to Peace has been engaged in innovation, collaboration, and movement building. Our vision is a world at peace, and our work is about building a culture of peace. So Pathways to Peace provides programs and projects, education, consultation, and mentorship. So working in partnership over the years, Pathways to Peace has inaugurated several UN-recognized global peace initiatives, including the upcoming UN International Day of Peace, celebrated every year on September 21st, the UN Culture of Peace Resolution and Program of Action, and the Global Peace Wave, which is a minute of silence, a moment of peace, heard round the world at noon in every time zone, just a pause for peace. So Pathways to Peace works in partnership with peace builders locally and globally, multi-generationally, and cross-culturally on programs that build peace and eliminate barriers to peace, including nuclear disarmament, climate change, racial inequity, and gender equality. We invite you to join us in our peace-building efforts. So since its inception, as Deborah implied, Pathways to Peace has always honored and supported women's leadership. So again, we have always been present and engaged in CSW. So this year, we actually have put forward 3 events. Some of you who are coming on in Zoom know that we had a presentation at the end of last week on our Girls Sheltering Guinea for girls who are brave and say no to female genital mutilation. On the 21st, and I will put this information in the chat, we have our You Speak event. And these are our high school students that prepare and present their perspectives on the issues that are most critical in our world. So they'll be speaking on human trafficking, intersectionality, racism and white privilege, and many other topics. So we hope you'll tune in for that as well. And because we support women's leadership, on March 8th, the International Women's Day, we launch every year the Exceptional Women of Peace Awards program. So we hope that you will nominate exceptional women of peace, because when we honor one, we honor all. So we're just honored and delighted to be hosting and sponsoring the empowerment of women and girls post-COVID, post Roe v. Wade. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to my beloved colleague, Deborah Green. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Tez. I have a great panel of women with me today. And, you know, I find it interesting. I always want to make sure I'm very respectful of the people on the panel and wanting to introduce them correctly, and always feel like I get it slightly wrong. I didn't, you know, emphasize the thing that they needed to be said. So I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to say thank you all so much for being here. And I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves so that I get it right by handing it over. So this is Meg Smith.
I'll begin. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I was the director of the Vermont Women's Fund for 10 years. I just handed over my crown to a wonderful new director, Emily Bush, who unfortunately, Emily is not feeling well and couldn't make the trip. She was on the Zoom and we could have met her that way, but I hope you all get the chance to meet Emily. And I'll be talking tonight about a report that we just finished up at the end of this year that I managed. So,
Thank you.
My name is Mika Seeley. I am the corporate philanthropy manager for the Vermont Food Bank. I've been at the food bank for about 10 years now. I live here in Woodstock, and I'll be here talking about food insecurity and just kind of my experience raising girls and being a woman here in our lovely state of Vermont.
Hello, everyone, and it's such an honor to be sitting with all these wonderful women who do incredible work in our state and to some degree in the world. My name is Tato Ratsebe, and I work for a nonprofit organization based in Burlington, Vermont, called the AALV, or the Association of Africans Living in Vermont. We provide services to newly arrived refugees, otherwise commonly known as the New American Community in Vermont. We also provide services to asylum seekers who qualify for some of the services that we have, such as immigration pathways into becoming legalized in Vermont. So thank you for having us. I'll be touching a little bit on refugee community, women and girls in the refugee community in Vermont. Thank you.
Am I even on screen?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying.
Oh, I
would
think if
adjust. I need to move
If we scoot this way, maybe?
and I will move.
Oh, well,
this
Can
up.
I'm
you
always
scoot that
happy to
way?
be closer
There we
to
go.
Tato. Yeah, it's tough. I couldn't, well. Okay, I'll lean into Tato.
Yeah. I'm
We
gonna-
see you. We see you very well. We
Oh,
see you
great.
very
Well, this is why you wear red, right? I'm Allison Clarkson, and it is a total pleasure to be here in our, Mika and I are lucky enough to live here in Woodstock. I am in the Vermont State Senate. I serve as the majority leader in the Senate, and I serve as vice chair of Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. Housing being one, of course, our top priorities to address this year, along with flood recovery and school funding. I also serve on Senate Government Operations. I've lived in Vermont for 32 years, and I love this work and love serving the people of both Windsor County and also Vermont. So thanks. And this has been a subject that's near and dear, I think, to all of our hearts. Much of what we do in the State House addresses issues that around women and of course families and all Vermonters, but in particular we have a women's caucus, and which is a really well attended fabulous group of women, and we're always addressing issues that involve women at the State House, as Meg knows. And Mika knows.
I'm excited to get to talk to you about the leadership in Vermont, because it's pretty women-centric as far as the power structure right now. Isn't that correct? What is
At the moment?
Yeah.
Amen, amen.
We have to keep it that way.
Amen, amen. So to begin with, do we have the ability to show the little movie, Becky? If we do, just give me a thumbs up, and if not,
Yes. Yes. Let me
So
cue that up.
thank you. This is a video that gives some background of what Meg is about to discuss.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hey there. Hey, everybody. Welcome. My inspiration was just a real drive to want to get out of a structure where I had to account to someone else. I wanted to account to myself, and I wanted to be able to have full flexibility in terms of how I worked with clients, when I worked with clients, where I worked with clients.
My favorite part of my business is connecting people and connecting resources that really help them succeed.
This is my first business that I own. I just wanted to be able to really run my own business in the way that I wanted to have a truly progressive business.
One of the things that really scared me about becoming a small business owner at such a young age was being alone in the process, not knowing who to turn to.
To know that when I walk through the fields and see how fertile they are, that is from generations, it feels like picking up the torch, building on something that my ancestors cared about just as much as I do.
Working for myself, it's validating to be paid for my services directly by my clients. I'm actually more excited about how I can use my business to change our culture in ways that inspire and excite me.
My favorite part about having my business and making money on my own is the flexibility and the freedom that comes with it. I can operate from anywhere in the world, at any space. I can be on the beach.
We're changing the idea of the popsicle.
So I got the one I wanted, this gorgeous velour purple couch, and I named my business after it.
But I also picture that taking care of our employees and our community, and really constantly being focused on a continuous growth mindset. It's just something that being an employer and specifically a women-owned employer in Vermont has really become a passion project, which is nothing like what I thought when I started Echo.
I'm all for women in entrepreneurship.
So I'm happy to say that I'm one of the 1,000 or however many are.
Thanks for hearing my little business takeaways.
Thanks.
And thank you, Vermont Women's Fund, for the work you do to amplify and uplift women business owners.
I'm proud of what we have accomplished here as women business owners in the state of Vermont, especially through a pandemic. And I'm also grateful to the Vermont Women's Fund and This Way Up for making sure our voices are being heard in the state of Vermont and beyond.
Change is powerful, and we have that power. Let's harness it together.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, should I start in for everybody?
Yes, you should.
Okay. What that video was about, as you could tell, was about women-owned businesses in the state of Vermont. And I'm going to back up a little bit first, tell you a moment about the Vermont Women's Fund and why we took on that work and what we've learned. Let me know when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll try not to go through the slides too quickly, but I also don't want to linger on them too long. Sometimes you start talking and suddenly I realize everyone's looking at the same screen that's been up for 5 minutes. So we hope we don't have to go through that. But the Vermont Women's Fund was started 30 years ago to basically put money to power where where it did not exist in the state of Vermont. Women's funds, there was a whole wave of women's funds that were started up 30 to 40 years ago for the very reason to harness economic power in order to create programming to help women and girls. And please, if you can't hear and I get too low in my register, just raise your hand. I'll speak up again.
And there are chairs over here as well if that's too far away.
I think we're going to have to be a little
Yeah.
louder.
Yeah.
So
we'll also try to be louder.
So the Women's Fund was really created to create a funding structure to achieve goals to advance women and girls in the state of Vermont. And 30 years ago, things were really considerably different in the economic outlook and landscape of Vermont. So in its first 10 to 15 years, the Women's Fund started with $0 and had to build a fund to then be able to dispense grants around the state. And I'm very proud of the fact that 30 years later, and particularly in the last 10 years, we built our endowment from basically when I started 10 years ago, we had less than $3 million, and that yielded somewhere between $100,000 to give out in grants. We've doubled our endowment. We're over $6 million now. Last year, actually, that number is wrong. Last year, we gave out $400,000 in grants to nonprofits around the state. You have to be a 501c3, and we give out general operating dollars as well as programmatic dollars. As part of the work that we did as a funder was beyond just giving out money, and that's part of the growth of the Women's Fund, is that we are also a champion of gender equity. And in the last 10 years, we spent a considerable amount of our money to try and highlight the systemic gaps that put women at a disadvantage from the start. And the way that is done is through data. Data is king. Data is part of our system that is respected and listened to. And if you don't have data, you don't have a platform. And 10 years ago, we set out to create data on women's economic status in the state of Vermont. And these 5 reports were published from 2016 through 2017 sequentially. So every time a new report came out, we put them in all the legislators' mailboxes. We did press releases, press conferences, and talked about what the findings were. You'll be happy to know I'm not going to go through all the findings tonight because that would take a long time. But the one report that really stuck in my craw was this women's business ownership in the Vermont economy. Because at that time, we discovered that no one knew how many women business owners there are in the state of Vermont. That data, which comes from the Secretary of State's office, when you start a business, you get a business license, there was no gender question. So no one in the state of Vermont knows how many women-owned businesses there are. And at the time of this report, we knew there were, at the time, I would say in the last 3 years, we knew there were roughly 81,000 plus businesses registered, but we didn't know the gender. And the question here is, why is this important? Why does it matter? Well, historically, we know women have lacked resources, back to needing a man's signature to get a credit card only 50 years ago. We're talking about many hundreds of years that have put women at a disadvantage, and even today, the lack of access to capital is documented across the country. Women are primarily responsible for childcare. They often, and most often, do not qualify for loans because they don't have any collateral. So the idea of wanting to start a business and get a loan to help you do that, if you don't have some collateral, some kind of financial backing, you're never going to get a loan. And we'll see the data shows that most women start their businesses with very little money. The thing about Vermont, we're a rural area. So there's rural isolation, which also has always been an impediment for women. And I'm really happy to say, if there's one good thing about the pandemic, it opened up the whole virtual world. So now the rural isolation that Vermont once experienced is no longer the defining factor. You know, it used to be you couldn't go to that trade show in Boston, or you couldn't network with people because you didn't even know how to meet them. Now the virtual world is really leveling the playing field, and we're seeing that. So I just want to say so we created an initiative from that, changed the story reports. We focused in on women's business ownership, and we branded it This Way Up, There's Power in Our Numbers, and created a digital platform that we asked women who had businesses to sign up and take a survey. And the team that helped create this are up here. Game Theory is run by Margaret Dibble, created the digital platform. You can see it online. Louisa Shibley was a project manager. Sarah Monroe, who's right over there, please raise your hand, did all the social media and marketing development, which was huge. She developed that video. That video was part of a series we called Feature Fridays, and we asked business owners to send in their videos. So, and myself, and we had a really exciting time doing it. So how do you do that? Okay, we created amazing website. You go on, take the survey, asked all these questions, aggregated the data in real time. But how to find those women business owners? We did not have endless amounts of money to do the marketing. So we really relied on, we met initially before when we were doing the survey, we met with over 45 different organizations and stakeholders. Secretary of State's office, almost every acronym in the state of Vermont represents a group that we talk to. So and including, Vermont Chamber, we tried to hit everybody who had a touch point with a woman entrepreneur in some way or other. And then we created marketing campaigns like the Feature Fridays. And that says Snoop Woman Owned, but it's really Shop Woman Owned.
That makes so much more sense.
At around holiday time, we had a whole effort where we're on television, et cetera, talking about women-owned businesses, and that they could find them on the website. And really our paid advertising was all on Front Porch Forum. So we got a lot of business owners that we would have never touched had we not had that marketing effort. And then word of mouth. So we created This Way Up, There's Power in Our Numbers. That was our branding. I mean, we really spent a lot of time just on how to make it look so that it didn't look like a survey, something boring. It had energy and a dynamism to it. And this is now from the report that you all have on your table, but after 2 years of keeping the survey open, we closed it with hearing from 3,432 women business owners, and those dots represent where their businesses are. So when you took the survey, you automatically got your business on the map, and you click the dot, and your business would come up. So we found out from our research of those 3,000 plus businesses, those businesses generate almost 6,500 part-time and full-time jobs, and annual earnings are over 2.4 billion. Now, this could be boring, except for the fact that it's never been known before. Now, this is an example of you clicked on the dot, and the name of the business, in this case, its address, most often it was a website, would come up. And then, so you could use that map to navigate around and find out who is a women-owned business in your town. Okay, so here's what we learned. This is where all these businesses are. This is the cumulative data now that the whole thing's been closed and we aggregated everything. As it turns out, if you look down lower right, I guess it doesn't, 424, Washington County has the highest number of women-owned businesses who took our survey per county in the state per capita. And as you can see, like their page numbers on the bottom here, so you can follow with a report. And let me just say, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers and data at you, so I don't expect anybody to be able to take it all in at once. But it gives us a roadmap for economic development for the state of Vermont. And that's the important, this is the baseline data that has never been collected before. Here are the industries. And again, lots to look at here. Our number one industry from our survey centers is in the wellness category. Artisan goods was the second highest, consulting and training, and then retail, healthcare and education as well. But again, trying to create just a baseline of what women are doing, how they're starting their businesses, and what kind of fields they are in. I have to say, in hindsight, you know, I'm like, wow, is wellness really the number one category for women-owned businesses? I don't know, but these are what we heard from our survey signers. And Front Porch Forum had a lot of solopreneurs. So, you know, once you start looking at data, which is not my number one fun thing to do, you start realizing where there might be holes in your research. So I just put it out there that all of the information we got was self-reported from the survey signers. We didn't double check them or anything. So, but it serves its purpose. Okay, here's the really important thing. They were asking about when they started, and look at the number of businesses that were started during the pandemic. It jumped up in 2021 and 2022, which shows us that women who were affected by the pandemic, often having to make choices to stay home, to be caregivers, to whatever was happening in their world, they were not sitting home idle. They were coming up with ways to create an income. And that demographic of those women starting in the pandemic, and then the large was ages 34 to 44, and then 45 to 54. So I'm allowed to say 34 to 44 is young. And but here are a group of women, and actually I think the video was a really good example of a lot. I mean, I didn't think about it, but it's a good example of the women who are starting businesses. They're trying to do something new. They probably have moved from one career and have had to switch gears, and they are trying to move the ball forward. And those are, we want to support those women. We want to build their businesses with them. Here's just an interesting demographic. Again, we asked women how they identified. So you start seeing that Vermont does have it's a diversity of representation of women and how they identify in the state. Again, that's I'm going to keep moving through because I don't want to take up too much time here. Probably the biggest surprise for me was what life changes led you to starting your business. I thought number two, the 19%, I became a caregiver, was going to be the number one thing. But no, 23% said I lost employment and decided it was time to work for myself. And that, once again, kind of goes to women working in a rural community, in a rural state. They don't have a lot of options. Many of our small towns, you know, are 3,000 or less in population, don't have a lot of, there's not a lot of job opportunities. So they start their own businesses. And how do they start them? Where did you get the funding to start your business? Okay, 56% said I didn't need funding. I slowly built my business up over time. 40% used savings. Only 12% got a loan from a bank or a credit union or whatever. That 56% is a number that can be interpreted many ways. My first interpretation was, oh my gosh, women are so resourceful. They don't need money. They just build their business, pull themselves up by the bootstraps, etc. And I had a really well-respected investment manager say to me very early on, because this data kind of all held together throughout the 2 years, the numbers, the percentages didn't change. And she said, if those women had had some access to capital. They would have built their business faster. They would have had the networks and made the connections and probably been much more successful than they are today. And that kind of took the wind out of my sails. But the more you look at the data and the more you look at national data, how difficult it is for women to get venture capital money. Nationally, something like 3% of VC money goes to women. It starts building this story of how women have had to start at ground zero or even below. Also on this page, what type of funding have you received for your business? Well, credit cards are like the #1 way to get yourself going. Not always the best financial planning, but very, very common. Okay, now here's some exciting stuff. And here's what should motivate all of us to see how important a women-based economy is. Because our survey signers, 95%, over 95%, contribute to causes in their communities. They are giving to their schools, they're at the charities in their communities. I'm sure all of you know of someone who's, donating money or services in kind to help with whatever cause it is. And we were able to say that's over $35 million, which no one's ever been able to put a dollar to, which for 3,000 plus women, that's a pretty good amount of money. But also it reinforces what we know internationally, that 10% of a woman's income, 90%, of a woman's income globally goes back into their communities. And that's true here in Vermont. So when a woman-owned business thrives, our communities thrive. And we see it time and time again statistically. So this was exciting to see how strong Vermont is in terms of its community building through economic development. Another very powerful number is that 77% of these women want to mentor and or connect with one another to help provide support, etc. I like to say that a lot of women, and I may be biased here, but a lot of women-centered capitalism is maybe different than what we think of as capitalism. Women want to support one another, they want to share knowledge, they want to see success. I think that's true for people across the board, but when you're talking about women in a rural area who up until now have experienced isolation, to just have that connection is extremely powerful. And we have some great nonprofits in the state of Vermont to help women-owned businesses with support, with training, and we are hoping to create some kind of mentoring network with a lot of these groups, but that's the future. I think, okay, that we're getting towards the end here. Looking at opportunities, what do women-owned businesses need? 57% want introductions to clients or potential customers, 41% growing their industry networks, 36% someone with experience who can guide me through rough patches, and 32% access to capital. 11% of respondents said other, which I've always been curious about. So again, I think what is important, and I'll try not to hammer it home too many times, is that this is new information. This is the first time we have any data on women-owned businesses, and much more needs to be done. But there are also ways that we can organize to help foster this segment of our economy that up until now has been completely invisible. No one knew any of this. So I want to just, our thank you here is really so you all can just see the number of different organizations and individuals that we consulted before we did this survey. And that's how we got a lot of buy-in from whether it was the state or Opportunities Credit Union, lots of different organizations. They heard about it when we started, and then they helped us by just spreading the word, putting things in their newsletter. It was part of our marketing campaign. And that is the beginning of conversation. Thank you.
One of the things I think that's so important is the slide before this, like how many people it takes to get going at this level and to get the conversations rolling. Was there anything that you were surprised about when it came to the mentorship opportunities or people like the donating amount that you saw? Because that to me struck me about the women-based economy, that the women-based economy isn't just about supporting each other. It's also about, you know, that women tend to donate more and therefore also donate more of their time, it seems to me.
Women donate more of their time. They don't always donate more of their dollars, which is part of the Women's Fund is talking about women-based philanthropy, because women-based philanthropy is often like our survey signers wanting to put money back into their local community. And so that is a big part of the Women's Fund. That's my really like shameless plug here. But supporting the Women's Fund is supporting women across the state, but also initiatives like this.